Miami is building a second downtown, not expanding the current one, building an entirely new one from scratch. And that's just project number 7 on this list. By 2030, Miami won't just be different, it'll be unrecognizable. We're talking about the kind of transformation that took other cities a century, compressed into half a decade. $40 billion, 7 megaprojects, one city that refuses to stay still. You probably think you know Miami. Beaches, Art Deco, maybe some flood risk. Sure, but while you weren't looking, Miami became the fastest-growing major metro in America. It overtook San Francisco in GDP. It's pulling in more international capital than anywhere outside New York. And now it's building the infrastructure to match that ambition. Let's start with the project that's literally reshaping the city's relationship with gravity. Project 7, Miami World Center. Remember when we said Miami is building a second downtown? This is it. Miami World Center, 27 acres in the heart of the city, wedged between downtown and the design district. When it's done, this single development will have added more square footage to Miami than most cities build in a decade. We're talking 10 million square feet. That's roughly the size of 175 football fields, stacked vertically. The project includes luxury condos, sure, a convention center that'll compete with Orlando, retail space that could swallow several shopping malls, and enough restaurants and bars to ensure you never eat at the same place twice in a year. The first phase opened in 2019. But here's where it gets interesting. By 2030, the entire complex will be connected by an elevated pedestrian network. You'll be able to walk from one end of this microcity to the other without ever touching street level. It's Miami's answer to Manhattan's High Line. Except it's not a park. It's a commercial ecosystem floating above the traffic. Cost: north of $4 billion. That's billion with a B. And the developers aren't even sweating it. Because Miami's luxury real estate market is so hot right now that penthouses are selling for 8 figures before construction crews finish the elevator shafts. But Miami World Center isn't trying to be the tallest or the flashiest. It's trying to be the densest, most walkable urban core in a city famous for requiring a car to buy milk. If it works, it fundamentally changes how Miami functions. Well, that's a really expensive mistake sitting in the middle of downtown. Speaking of expensive mistakes that might actually be brilliant, let's talk about the tunnel. Project 6, the Miami Port Tunnel. But stay with me. Because what's happening in 2025 through 2030 is the full realization of why this tunnel exists in the first place. And it's going to change American logistics whether you notice it or not. The Port of Miami is the cruise capital of the world. 7 million passengers a year, pre-pandemic. And here's the problem that tunnel solved. Every single cargo truck leaving the port used to drive straight through downtown Miami. We're talking thousands of trucks a day, clogging up streets, pumping out emissions, turning rush hour into a Mad Max audition. The tunnel changed that. 4,200 feet long, running 120 feet below Biscayne Bay, it connects the port directly to Interstate 395. Trucks now bypass the entire downtown core. Drive time from port to highway, cut by 40 minutes. Emissions in downtown, dropped by a third. But here's why this matters for 2030. The Port of Miami is in the middle of a $7 billion expansion. They're dredging the shipping channel to 50 feet deep. Why? So they can handle the new generation of mega container ships. The ones that are too big for the Panama Canal's old locks. When those ships start arriving regularly in 2027 and beyond, the port's cargo capacity will triple, and all that cargo needs to move inland fast. Which means the tunnel suddenly becomes the most important piece of infrastructure in Southeast Florida. Without it, Miami would choke on its own success. The city becomes the primary gateway for goods moving between South America, the Caribbean, and the entire eastern United States. They just built a massive fulfillment center with direct tunnel access. So does Walmart. So does every major logistics company in the Western Hemisphere. The tunnel isn't sexy. Nobody's taking Instagram photos of a tunnel entrance. But it's the reason Miami can scale up without grinding to a halt. Sometimes the most important infrastructure is the kind you forget exists. Unlike our next project, which is very hard to miss, Project 5, Brightline extension to Orlando and Tampa Brightline, is the first privately funded intercity passenger rail system built in America in over a century. Let that sink in. A century. While Europe and Asia were building high-speed rail networks, America was arguing about whether trains were socialism. Then a Florida real estate company said, "Forget the politics. We're just going to build it ourselves." And they did. The Miami to West Palm Beach line opened in 2018. Fast, clean, comfortable. You could suddenly commute from Fort Lauderdale to Miami faster by train than by car, and without the rage-inducing experience of I-95 traffic. Radical concept. Phase 2 opened in 2023. Miami to Orlando, 235 miles in 3 hours. But here's what makes this interesting. Brightline didn't just connect two cities. They built stations that are also real estate developments, offices, retail, all within walking distance of the platform. They're not in the train business. They're in the land appreciation business. The trains just make the land valuable. By 2030, Phase 3 will be operational, with new express service cutting the Miami to Orlando time down to 2.5 hours. Suddenly, you can live in Miami, take a morning meeting in Orlando, have lunch in Tampa, and be home for dinner. The 3 biggest metros in Florida, connected by frequent, reliable rail service. This changes the math on where people choose to live and work. It creates a genuine mega-region. The kind of economic integration that usually takes decades of government planning, except it's happening because a private company realized they could make money by making cities function better. Current ridership exceeded projections by 20%. By 2030, Brightline expects to move 8 million passengers a year. That's 8 million fewer cars on I-95 and the Florida Turnpike. 8 million fewer reasons to expand highways. 8 million reasons for developers to build near stations instead of sprawling further into the Everglades. And speaking of the Everglades, our next project is either environmental salvation or a $16 billion Band-Aid. Maybe both. Project 4. The Everglades Restoration Project. This is the largest ecosystem restoration project in human history. Not in American history, human history. And it's happening in Miami's backyard. The Everglades used to be a slow-moving river, 60 miles wide and 100 miles long, flowing from Lake Okeechobee to Florida Bay. Then we decided that was inconvenient for agriculture and development. So we drained half of it, channeled the rest, and built cities on top of the wetland. Turns out, that was a mistake. A huge one. Because the Everglades isn't just a swamp. It's South Florida's water supply, storm surge barrier, and the reason Miami doesn't get completely obliterated by every hurricane that wanders through the Caribbean. The Restoration Project, authorized in 2000 but really ramping up through 2030, is trying to fix a century of environmental vandalism. $16 billion over 40 years. Remove levees. Restore natural water flow. Rebuild wetlands. Re-engineer how water moves through South Florida without, flooding Miami. It's engineering on an absurd scale. They're building massive stormwater treatment areas, aquifer storage and recovery systems, reservoir projects that'll hold more water than some Great Lakes, pump stations that can move billions of gallons per day. By 2030, the first major components will be operational. Water flow to Florida Bay will increase by 80%. That means healthier fisheries, better hurricane protection, a more stable freshwater supply for 8 million people who live in the region. Because here's the thing, nobody talks about. Miami's biggest long-term threat isn't sea level rise. It's freshwater scarcity. Saltwater intrusion is already contaminating wells. The Biscayne Aquifer, which supplies all of South Florida's drinking water, is vulnerable. Without Everglades restoration, Miami's growth hits a hard wall around 2040 when the water runs out. This project is insurance. A $16 billion bet that you can fix an ecosystem while simultaneously supporting 10 million people living next to it. Nobody's done this before. We're making it up as we go. But if it works, Miami becomes the example of how cities can grow without destroying the natural systems they depend on. And if it doesn't work, well, everyone in South Florida better get really comfortable with desalination. Speaking of water, let's talk about the project that's either going to solve Miami's flooding problem or just really expensively delay it. Project 3, Miami Forever Bond Infrastructure Projects. In 2017, Miami voters approved a $400 million bond specifically for sea level rise and flooding infrastructure. Miami Forever Bond. Catchy name. In 2020 they approved another $2.5 billion. And the projects funded by these bonds are transforming the city's relationship with water between now and 2030. We're talking about dozens of individual projects, new stormwater pumps, raised roads, upgraded seawalls, flood barriers, porous pavement, green infrastructure. The whole toolkit of climate adaptation. Take Shorecrest. This neighborhood floods during king tides. Not storms, just regular high tides. So they're installing 30 new stormwater pumps, raising roads by 2 feet, and rebuilding the entire drainage system. Or look at what's happening in Little Haiti. Historically a lower-income neighborhood, it sits on slightly higher ground than the surrounding areas. As sea levels rise, it's becoming some of the most valuable land in Miami. The Forever Bond is funding major infrastructure upgrades there to handle increased density as development follows the topography upward. By 2030, Miami will have installed over 200 new stormwater pumps, raised more than 80 miles of roadway, built or reinforced 50 miles of seawalls. The goal is to buy the city 40 to 60 years before more dramatic interventions become necessary. Critics say this is futile, that you can't pump your way out of sea level rise. And they're not wrong. Eventually, Miami faces an existential question about whether it can exist in its current form. But 2030 is not that day. These projects are about ensuring Miami can function normally through mid-century, giving the city time to adapt and evolve. The economic calculation is simple. Every dollar spent on pre-disaster mitigation saves $6 in post-disaster recovery. Miami's real estate is worth over $600 billion. Spending $3 billion to protect that seems like a reasonable insurance premium. But insurance only matters if people want to stay. Which brings us to the project designed to make Miami irresistible to a very specific type of person. Project 2, Miami Tech Hub and Innovation District. Miami is trying to become the next Silicon Valley, except warmer, with better beaches and fewer NIMBYs preventing you from building housing. The city is betting $3 billion on this transformation, and it's happening fast. The centerpiece is the Miami Innovation District, a 30-acre tech campus in the urban core. Think of it as a university without the university. Co-working spaces, research labs, accelerators, venture capital offices, all designed to create density and collision between startups, investors, and talent. Microsoft just committed to a 50,000 square foot innovation hub there. SoftBank opened their Latin America headquarters in Miami. Blackstone moved their tactical opportunities team. Citadel relocated from Chicago, bringing 1,000 high-paying jobs. And that's just the brand names everyone recognizes. The real story is the explosion of crypto and fintech companies. Miami has positioned itself as America's crypto capital, helped significantly by a mayor who literally puts laser eyes on his Twitter profile and talks about Miami Coin. Whether you think crypto is the future or a speculative bubble, the companies are here and they're hiring. By 2030, Miami's tech sector is projected to employ over 150,000 people. The TUPs from 50,000 in 2020. Average salaries in these jobs? North of 120 grand. That's the kind of income that supports restaurants, retail, arts, and all the things that make a city feel alive. The city is also investing heavily in tech education, partnership with Florida International University, to create specialized degree programs, coding boot camps, STEM programs, in public schools. They're trying to grow local talent, instead of just importing it from California and New York. But here's the tension. Tech workers drive up housing costs. Miami's rental prices have increased 40% in 3 years. Wages for service workers haven't kept pace. The city risks becoming unaffordable for the people who actually make it function. Teachers, firefighters, restaurant workers, nurses. The Innovation District includes a mandate for workforce housing. But whether that's enough remains to be seen. Miami is trying to become world-class and affordable simultaneously. Nobody's figured out how to do that yet. San Francisco certainly didn't. Still, the bet makes sense. Miami has always been a hub for Latin American capital. Now it's adding tech to finance and trade. The vision is a city that's genuinely cosmopolitan. Pitch investors in the afternoon, and close a deal with Brazilian partners over dinner. All without ever experiencing a California-style housing crisis or New York taxes. Ambitious? Absolutely. Possible? We're about to find out. The project that makes all the others possible. Project 1. But let's talk about what $7 billion actually buys you at the Port of Miami. Because this isn't just an expansion. It's a complete reimagining of how cargo moves through the Western Hemisphere. The centerpiece is the Deep Dredge project. They're excavating the shipping channel to 50 feet deep and 400 feet wide. That might not sound dramatic until you realize most ports on the East Coast can't handle ships that big. New York, New Jersey can. Baltimore can barely. Charleston is working on it. Miami? Miami saw this coming a decade ago and started digging. The new Panamax ships, the ones built specifically for the expanded Panama Canal, can carry 14,000 containers. The older generation maxed out at 5,000. That's not incremental improvement. That's a complete transformation of shipping economics. And those ships need deep water. By 2030, Port Miami will have 3 new mega cranes. Each one costs $30 million and can reach across a ship 23 containers wide. They're investing $300 million in terminal improvements, new rail connections, expanded warehousing, refrigerated storage for perishables coming from South America. The port is also building a 120-megawatt power substation. Why? Because the ships of the future will plug into shore power instead of running diesel generators while docked. Cleaner air for Miami. Lower costs for shipping lines. Another example of infrastructure being built for a future that's arriving faster than most cities realize. Current cargo volume? 2 million containers per year. The port expects to handle 4 million. And unlike Houston or Los Angeles, Miami can process ships faster because there's less congestion and better highway connections. Thanks to that tunnel we talked about earlier. This matters beyond Florida. When cargo lands in Miami, it can reach 70% of the U.S. population within 4 days by truck. Distribution centers are already following. Amazon has 3 massive facilities within 30 miles of the port. Walmart has 2. Every major retailer is building logistics capacity around Miami because the port is becoming the fastest route from Asia and South America to American consumers. The economic multiplier is absurd. The port directly employs 30,000 people. It indirectly supports 350,000 jobs throughout Florida. By 2030, those numbers will be 50% higher. The port generates $43 billion in annual economic activity. That's roughly equal to the entire GDP of Bolivia. And here's the kicker. Cruise ships. Port Miami is still the cruise capital of the world, and the industry is roaring back post-pandemic. By 2030, the port expects 8 million cruise passengers per year, each one spending an average of $150 in Miami before boarding. That's $1.2 billion in tourism revenue just from people passing through. The port is what makes Miami more than a pretty beach town. It's the reason the city has genuine global relevance. When all these upgrades are complete, Miami won't just be competing with other American ports. It'll be competing with Rotterdam and Singapore for the title of most efficient port in the world. Tall order? Sure. But Miami's been defying expectations since it was founded on a mangrove swamp 130 years ago. So there you have it. 7 megaprojects. $40 billion. One city that's building its future in real time. Miami will have new infrastructure, new industries, new neighborhoods, and new challenges. It'll be wealthier and more connected, but also more expensive and more vulnerable to climate change. The question isn't whether these projects will change Miami. They will. The question is whether Miami can grow without losing what makes it Miami. Whether it can become world-class without becoming unaffordable. Whether it can build seawalls high enough and pump stations strong enough to buy time for adaptation. Nobody knows the answer yet, but we're about to find out. Because in Miami, the future isn't something you wait for. It's something you build, one mega project at a time.